Why did your 8-year-old son get taken to court? So I'm sitting in small claims court, watching my 8-year-old son Tommy wipe his snot-filled nose while our HOA president claims he committed botanical assault and is asking for $80,000 from him. She's wearing pearls and a pantsuit, clutching tissues like she's at a funeral. The charge? Riding his bike through her garden and crushing what she calls irreplaceable heritage white lilies passed down through 4 generations. This whole disaster started 3 weeks after we moved into this new neighborhood. My wife had this brilliant idea that we should introduce ourselves properly to the neighbors, so she baked 6 dozen snickerdoodles, yes, she's old-fashioned, and had Tommy deliver them on his bike. The kid was so excited, wearing his Batman helmet and this little messenger bag we got him, pedaling around like he was on some important mission. He'd knock on doors, hand over cookies in these cellophane bags with ribbons and say, "Hi, we're the new neighbors from 42. Most neighbors loved it. Some even gave him $5 and asked if he had the recipe. Everything was going perfectly until he reached the last house on the street. You see, that house is where Mrs. Whitmore lived, our HOA president who measured grass height with an actual ruler. Tommy rode up from the curb toward her front door, cutting through the garden bed because the walkway was blocked by some decorative rocks she'd placed there. His bike tire went through maybe 2 feet of flowers, just these white lilies near the edge, and the door flew open before he could even ring the bell. Mrs. Whitmore came charging out, screaming, "You are destroying my property! Stoop!" Then she pushed Tommy off his bike while shrieking that he'd destroyed her great-grandfather's legacy. Tommy hits the pavement crying, cookies scattered everywhere, and she's standing over him taking photos of the flowers like it's a crime scene. I went to make sure Tommy was okay, and she told me, "You should have kept your kid in line. Now you're going to face the consequences? Look, I'll pay you $20 for the flowers, but you need to apologize to my son," I said, because I was angry at how she had no qualms about laying hands on a child. She laughed, said she will never apologize for disciplining a criminal, and then went back inside. I thought I could write her off as crazy and move on, but nope, Mrs. Whitmore had a plan. Within a week, she hired a lawyer and sued us. Not me, specifically. She sued my 8-year-old son for intentional infliction of emotional distress and destruction of protected botanical specimens. Her lawyer, this sweaty guy in a tight suit, stood up in court claiming these weren't just any flowers. These were supposedly Lilium candidum heritage specimens, protected under the State Historical Flora Preservation Act, valued at $40,000 per plant. Tommy had destroyed 2, hence $80,000. He actually said with a straight face that my son had shown reckless disregard for historical preservation and malicious intent toward protected species. When it was my turn, I didn't have a lawyer because honestly, this entire fiasco was comical. I stood up and asked, "So, Mrs. Whitmore, when did your great-grandfather plant these heritage lilies?" She lifted her chin proudly. 1925, 100 years ago, passed down through 4 generations. I nodded. And these specific flowers my son damaged, they're the original plants. She clutched her pearls. The exact same bloodline, preserved and maintained by my family for a century. I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness." Whitmore looked bewildered, like she never expected me to argue. She looked around the courtroom frantically and panicked when she saw Mrs. Flora in the back. You see, Mrs. Flora owned the flower shop that was 2 blocks away from our house. When the judge nodded, Mrs. Flora came forward and said, "I sold Mrs. Whitmore 2 white lily plants on March 14th for $15 each. She asked for the cheapest ones I had." Whitmore's face went white, and she immediately tried to control the narrative. "Those were replacement lilies for the gaps in my heritage garden." Mrs. Flora shook her head. "Ma'am, you told me you were starting a new garden bed. You specifically said, and I quote, 'I want something that is cheap but looks expensive.'" The courtroom went silent for about 3 seconds. Then the judge's shoulders started shaking. He covered his mouth, but the laugh exploded out anyway. This loud, unexpected burst that echoed off the walls. That triggered everyone. The bailiff turned away, his whole body vibrating with suppressed laughter. The court reporter gave up and just put her head down. Even Mrs. Whitmore's lawyer closed his briefcase with a defeated snap. She stood up, shouting over the laughter, "They still have sentimental value. I want my babies back." The judge wiped his eyes, looked at Tommy, who was still wiping his nose, then back at Mrs. Whitmore. "Ma'am, you pushed an 8-year-old off his bicycle and sued him for $80,000 over $30 worth of flowers you wanted to look expensive?